We appreciate that. Some of you may need to have them off, and that's fine too. Okay, so as we so commonly do, we're going to begin with the land acknowledgement, but we're going to do it as a practice. So even though it's dark outside, if you could come to standing and bring your eyes away from the screen for a moment and just moving somewhere into your space where either you can see outside or you can see an object of nature that's representative of the earth. And closing your eyes for a moment or so, and if you are standing, really feeling the weight of the feet on the floor. If you're still sitting, also if you're able to feel the pressure of the feet or some other body part in contact with the surface that you're resting on, making it representative of the earth. Checking in with the body here, rooted. And then if the eyes have been closed, opening them and taking in with a sense of sight the natural object or plant or the view outside if there is one. And using this as an opportunity to reflect upon the land in which we find ourselves, remembering that we are, most of us, immigrants here. Grateful to be where we are and that we rest on the shoulders of those who have come before us on land that was taken unwillingly. But now we attempt these small acts of reconciliation, honoring and remembering those for whom the place we are is still home. And in Toronto, we are on the land of the Haudenosaunee, the Wendat, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Mississaugas of the Credit, and so many other Inuit and Métis peoples. And then in addition, knowing that we are in a space of diversity and wanting to make it as much a space of inclusion as possible for all of those who are here from many intersectionalities, ethnicities, orientations, religions, and so much more. And then closing the eyes once again, taking stock of the body-mind. Taking a few breaths. And then coming back, when you're ready, opening the eyes and coming back to sitting. And what I'd like to do is just briefly do introductions and thank yous, and then we'll do another brief arrival practice. So for those of you who don't know me, I'm Patricia Rockman, and I'm the co-founder with the lovely Tita Anganko of the Center for Mindfulness Studies, who is in one of these small squares. And I'm a physician really now with a focused practice in this work only. And Allison, could you introduce yourself?
So I'm Allison McLay. I also work at the center and teaching mindfulness groups and doing some of the professional development there and involved also in programming. Yeah, thanks.
Thanks, Allie. Lee?
And I'm Lee Freedman, a psychiatrist in Toronto who's a big friend of the Center for Mindfulness Studies. and I've been involved on and off with various projects, and grateful for that.
So if we had the time, we would have you all introduce yourselves, but we mostly know who you are, and hopefully you know us or you wouldn't be here. So welcome. And we'd like to just start today by thanking everybody for coming. And also, we really need to acknowledge a number of people. We won't be able to acknowledge everyone who helped us with the writing and the development and production of this book. And the person that we really acknowledge for her support and vision is Tita Angango, because really without her, we wouldn't have even gotten to the place where we could write a book. And her vision in terms of and efforts and tireless work in conjunction with Tim Warner, her husband, who keeps himself in the background but is definitely a force to be reckoned with. The two of them together have done so much work in disseminating mindfulness locally, nationally, and internationally. And we really need to thank Jim Harbinger, because also if we didn't have a publisher, we also wouldn't have a book. And I see Chantal is here somewhere, and Chantal is a teacher of mindfulness, and she was really helpful to us in reading one of the earlier drafts and commenting. And then there are other people who gave us stories and contributed to bringing this book alive. And one of those is Jen McNursie, who you can also see in a little square. And so we're really grateful to all of those people, including Allison's and my daughters and others who contributed stories that we then adapted. So think that's that's good for now. But we also thank all of our teachers, the young and the older, and all of those people that I have forgotten to name. So our agenda for tonight, we are going to be covering a number of things, and we hope to interact with you somewhat. And one of the things we want to do is talk about the origins of this book and how it came to be and why we even bothered to do it. It's not like there aren't other teen mindfulness books on the market. How we worked together, which was actually quite fun, believe it or not. And we want to talk to some of the current research, because many of you know there's a big study that came out very relevant to mindfulness in teens. So we're going to talk about that and its relationship to what we did. And then we'll do a little bit of practice, reflections, and hopefully have time for discussion. So I'm going to just turn it over to Allison to talk a little bit about why this book.
Why this book? Okay.
Why this book?
Okay, so as Pat said, there's other mindfulness books for teens, some very good ones. And so why did we think we might have something to contribute here? And a lot of it stems from kind of doing programs with young people and learning from them what was engaging and not on the ground. So that was incorporated into our own experience in working with young people. And we wanted to actually try and make it as accessible and relevant as possible. And we took a somewhat different approach. But to start with why this book, of course, we are believers, right? We are believers that mindfulness can be helpful. And, when I think about the teen years, I think, oh, I wish I knew some of the approaches, perspectives, tools that I have now through mindfulness when I was that age. There's a lot of suffering in the teen years. And, we believe that mindfulness has a lot to offer around suffering. So how do we communicate that? So we really wanted to emphasize the exploration of experience. That was our premise for doing a lot of what we did. Not so much the formal practices, but seeing if we could get people curious about just their inner world and their inner experience and how to explore that, kind of voyage of discovery. So that was really the intention of how we went about writing this book, and also incorporating the things we had learned. So Barry Boyce wrote a really lovely review of our book, which I totally appreciate. And I was really pleased to see that, you know, one of the things he said was, you can't just tell people what to do or how to do it. You have to really collaborate with young people. Chances are they'll reject it if you just tell them what to do or what to know. So he had said about the book, the journey is about inquiry, finding your own path, not an indoctrination. And I thought, oh, that's really lovely. That was our intention in the way we wrote the book. So yeah, that's how it came about.
Allison. So then we wanted to just also give a little background on some of our experience around the origins. And it's hard to believe, but Tita and I have been working together since, I guess, a long time, 2010. The center opened in 2011, and it's still functioning. And one of the things that has been really incredible is Tita's development of the community program. And this provided us with a lot of opportunities to engage in creative development of curricula for many different populations from a variety of sectors, and with varied socioeconomic backgrounds. And so one of the things that we did from various grants that Tita was able to get was we developed a program initially for managing stress through mindfulness for frontline workers, which then morphed into a training program, a train the trainer program for frontline workers to work with their clients, some of who would be younger people, some who would be older people. And so we started to get a lot of experience in working with populations with affordability and access issues and adaptations of the protocols that we had been trained in, such as MBSR or MBCT, mindfulness-based stress reduction, or mindfulness-based cognitive therapy. And then, again, Tita got more money out of various governments and public sector organizations. And we, one of the things, Allison will talk about this in a minute, around this other program that the book really came out of. But one of the things also that Tita did was, and Tam, work in collaboration with a number of people in the Philippines at various universities there. And so we developed a significant program for guidance counselors there for bringing mindfulness to youth in the Philippines. So that required another adaptation, both to that specific population and also to younger people. And so we started to kind of garner a lot of experience in how to do this on the ground, really thinking about applied mindfulness. And as best we could, also engaging in program evaluation. And then Allison and I and Lee and others then got involved in another program, the GROW program. So maybe Ellie, you could just speak to that a little bit.
Yeah, that was fairly extensive. So we were working with social service agencies all across Toronto. And, you know, based on some of the models that had been developed, we developed some programming to do mindfulness groups with the youth that were being served in these agencies, and also to train the people, frontline workers who were working with them, to deliver the program. So it was a multi-step process. And as we were going through it, it was we were getting feedback, constant feedback from, you know, how the groups were going, how they were responding to the material, which of course we'd done our lit search, and we'd done all this research and about how to engage. But you know, there's still lots of challenges with that. And And so we just watched how it unfolded and got all of this feedback from people, including the people delivering, who really knew the youth they were serving, right? So we learned as much as anybody, or more than anybody, during that process. And it was great for a lot of people. I think it was really appreciated, but it's hard to kind of engage young people, especially when they're very stressed by their circumstances, in something that actually takes a fair bit of patience, right? And process. So, everybody did their best, and there were some lovely results, but we knew that there were some additional challenges that we thought we would hope to address. Yeah. So that's it.
Thanks, Allie. So, so there's this big study, which many of you probably know about, called the Myriad study. And Barry Boyce with Mindful did a really wonderful job of unpacking that study, as he put it. And, you know, in a nutshell, this study that actually went on for a number of years, looked at thousands of students, found that, in fact, they looked at 28,000 children in 100 schools and 650 teachers with 20 million individual points of data. Brian, my husband, he can conceive of all of that. These are too many numbers for me. And then, you know, they also looked at some of the, central to the study was a large randomized control trial involving 85 schools and over 8,000 young adolescents, looking at the effectiveness and cost effectiveness of a schools-based mindfulness training. This is out of England, the .B program, in 11 to 14-year-olds. And what they found, actually, in a nutshell, is that it didn't improve mental health for those students. And, you know, then, but of course, science is ever changing and never complete. And so then what a number of people have done, as well as the authors of the study, they started to look at, like, well, what was effective here? What did work and what didn't work? One of the things they found was that the teachers who were trained to deliver the program, they had enhanced well-being. And they also found that the climate in the schools changed, that it was improved for the young people. And so, you know, this raises a number of questions about, you know, what makes for actual effective transmission or dissemination of mindfulness to who, and also who should be delivering it and how. And so a number of things they talked about was that, you know, in all likelihood, it may be that teachers delivering this to students may not be the way to go. Also, the teachers' training wasn't very long. It was a couple of weeks, which is a lot of effort for the teachers, but many of us who work in this field would say that that's not long enough to be able to convey this work effectively. They also talked about that, you know, the students are a captive audience. They're mandated to take this training. So I don't know about you, but those of you who know me anyway know that I don't do very well when I'm mandated to do anything, and I don't think that I'm unique in that way. So, you know, that they talked about the students essentially being, you know, kids in schools are like prisoners. So it's not going to go over well if you're telling them they have to learn mindfulness and it's not something they're particularly interested in. And so there are a bunch of other variables that they, you know, commented on and thought about. But one of the things they discussed was that there's a real need to change the environment that students find themselves in, as well as enhancing perhaps the mindfulness of the people who work with them. And what's interesting about that, I think, is that so often mindfulness, whether it's for young people or for adults, becomes a kind of way to download the problems of the world onto the individual without having to change the system. And so one of the, I think that the great things about this study and the fact that it got published, because often negative results don't, is that it opens up, at least a conversation about how we might think about what might be more effective ways to deliver this work to youth, particularly because, we know that 1 in 5 youth have a mental health problem. And so there's a great need to help to prevent serious and persistent mental disorders, and also to help enhance their skills as they move toward adulthood. So I think that's probably good around that. Lee, do you want to say anything else about this at this time, about that study? No? Okay. Ali, do you have anything else you want to add at the moment? No. Okay. There, you see. All right. So I would say also that in terms of mindfulness and adaptation, since a lot of the work in the West has been designed by adults for adults, and as well as certain other, intersectionalities, I would say white people for white people for the most part. And that is, although that is changing rapidly now, it's important to consider when we are adapting a mindfulness program, who it is that we're adapting it for, what are their needs, their specific needs, how do we make it relevant, and what is the best way to figure out how we might go about developing a program. And one of the things we've learned at the center, and that Lee and Allison know, is that it's really important that we get input from the populations that we're working with, that we have advice from them, that they are highly involved in the development of the work itself. And so the GROW program and the work in the Philippines, we used advisory groups and people from these different populations to help inform what we were doing, and as best we can have also brought people in from those populations to learn to deliver this work. So with this book, I think one of the things we want to talk about in terms of adapting for teens is to ask you a question. And what I'd like to do is to just ask you to pop into the chat. So what do you imagine some of the developmental considerations are for youth? If you're thinking about adapting a program, what are some of the developmental considerations, or the kinds of things they need to, tasks they need to engage in? What happens there, the tasks, the capacities, the kinds of conditions they find themselves in. Okay, this is great, so stuff's coming in here. So the kinds of things one might need to consider are gender differences, their ability to focus and attention, knowing that at different stages of adolescence, the needs are going to be different as well, right? Attention span, okay. So shorter attention span. So when we're looking at adapting these programs, if we think we're going to use formal practices, they're going to have to be short and varied. Experiencing delight, nice, yes. Chantal, what their peers are doing. Okay, so this really speaks to, youth aren't going to want to hear from people like Lee and myself and Allison, right? Like, we don't exactly look like them. We don't behave like them. We are not of their species, if you like. Sean, I'm thinking of sexuality, peer pressure, all these things that are coming in you can read. So you're starting to see all of these things that we want to pay attention to as they become self-conscious and aware of social pressures and social acceptability. Okay, right, good. Okay, and so Lee, can I ask you something? So, when you think of the tasks of adolescence, what do you like? What comes to mind?
So just to preface the actual what comes to mind about tasks is to say, why is like to really understand what the tasks are about. And what they're about is traversing this kind of transition that's very, very long, getting longer every year, of bridging childhood and into adulthood, but it's not really a bridge, it's a whole transformation. And so the tasks are what's going to help one thrive and deal with adversity and everything while they're kind of going through this incredible stage of transformation. So we think of things like that will help them to, let's say, become adults who are competent. So autonomy becomes super important. Learning how to become autonomous. Actually separating and individuating from their family of origin or anything. It's like an actual task for them to be able to be autonomous as they're entering adulthood. Identity formation is just crucially important. And it's sort of, you could think of almost two, it's almost like a bit of a dialectic, because part of the identity formation is a sense of belonging, which is really, really important for all of us, but very important at that intermediary stage. And then on the other hand, uniqueness, and honor my own individuality. And this is where the kind of idea of diversity and connecting, coming together, provides teens and provides everyone with the best possible way to go through things. So in terms of the tasks, so identity formation, autonomy, competence, feeling like you can handle things. And a very, very important one is the expanding relational field, developing relationships, new kinds of relationships. And so in order to do those tasks, they can be quite annoying and irritating and all the rest of, to people who aren't in that stage, some may say. Certainly not make life easy for those around them. And they get such a horrible rap for that reason, because they're just doing what they're supposed to be doing, right? They're individuating, they're kind of, they're not agreeing with you. It doesn't make life easy for us, but yeah, that's what they're supposed to be doing. And so lots of it, I think we can reframe. I love the way Dan Siegel has in his book, Brainstorm, but there's a real reframing of what happens during adolescence. And he refers to this concept of essence, where there's a sort of an emotional intensity, right? There's this just, there's a lot of emotions up and down. And that's in order to kind of go out into the world and experience the world. It's a charming part of adolescence. And then ES, social engagement, again, the relational aspect. And SE, novelty seeking. And novelty seeking, you can totally see how that's going to serve them. It's annoying because it's hard to keep someone like straight on what you want them to learn and by practicing it over and over again. But novelty seeking is about really becoming aware of what's out there and what your choices are. And it's a wonderful thing certainly at that stage of life. And then creative expression, like so important for identity formation, right? To be able to actually reflect on what's going on inside and to be able to then express it. And so these are really important tasks of adolescence. And when bringing anything that we feel is valuable enough to learn, for them to learn, I think keeping these tasks in mind really as important considerations in trying out what might be more engaging and more relevant. So.
Thanks, Lee.
Okay.
So these are some of the things we want to think about when we are adapting mindfulness programs to youth. And we did consider these, obviously, because Lee helped us with the book when we wrote the book. In addition, one of the things we were talking about today, Lee and I, were the kind of evolving capacities that youth, are engaged in. And so, Lee, maybe you could just speak to these also, just briefly,
sure,
so that we can
fill
that out.
I mean, I think somebody in the chat said neurodiversity, so that would be a good example, right? It's not about able, disable, but it's capacities for different kinds of things. We all have an incredible, to all of us, a diversity of the way our brains work and the kinds of things we're more likely to pay attention and the way we regulate our attention. So there's a lot of differences right there and then. And those, I think, it's helpful to keep that in mind because, sitting still for 10 minutes is phenomenal for some, and for others, it's like torture. So especially for adolescents. And for many, don't get me wrong, I think learning to be still is a phenomenally important skill to be teaching. But I think we just have to be aware of what capacities we're meeting them at, and then kind of, ease in whatever skills we think they may want to experiment with, not teaching them, but experiment with. So that's another example would just be even between the age of 12 and like 20. I don't know what adolescence is defined as anymore, but even in that stage, right? The ability to think abstractly or concretely, all these kinds of capacities that are more nuanced about cognitive development, they're different along that spectrum. And these need to be taken into consideration because mindfulness is a pretty abstract concept. And so reflecting and everything requires a certain capacity to be able to work with that in some way. And then capacities to regulate attention, capacity, like just right there and then, the second they get introduced to mindfulness, the ability to sit still versus needing to move around. Like there's just tons and tons of visual capacity to pay attention to their body. Like there's just everyone's in a different place in all these capacities. They're not all in this kind of one place. So you can, so that if you take this one approach, it's going to mean something to everybody. So I think the consideration is, how do we kind of really spread out the possibilities of entry points for everybody to make it accessible?
And Lee, Paul wrote in the chat, he wrote that, this age also is like more involved with, developing awareness or of their emotions, or learning to work with their emotions than they are in self-reflection, which speaks to, when the capacity for metacognition or self-regulation comes online.
Yeah.
So can you talk a little bit about that? Because I think it's relevant to also adapting these programs into what we wrote.
Yes, absolutely. So I think that all along the spectrum, it's possible that somebody's either developmentally or experientially has not been exposed to learning some of these skills and some of these capacities. And then there are some that just aren't able to, just because of the stage of brain development they're in. And then for others, they could have been, quite blessed or privileged to have had exposure to a regulating adult in their life, and a one who can actually model, not more than model, really embody, some of these capacities. So kids come from all different kinds of experiences, and they have all kinds of capacities biologically that are easy or hard for them. Oh my gosh, I've lost my train of thought. See? Repeat the question, please. I'm sorry.
No, it's fine. Hey, we all lose our trains of thought. And now one of the good things about aging.
Let's get into the self.
It doesn't matter. Okay,
that's right. It just doesn't matter.
So the question was just getting at the development of our, like, this kind of tension that, and Paul was he just kind of noted it, that in youth, this tension between this working with, like, one tends to be more kind of emotionally focused and less metacognitively focused. And for mindfulness, this is a skill you actually require.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, I think sometimes mindfulness as the 3-minute breathing space will show, it really is this kind of merging of this awareness out here, awareness inside here, awareness in the brain. Like there's all these different forms of awareness, and there's the actual attention piece, which can be open or very, very focused or shifting or any of those things. So there's a lot of awareness skills of different nature, and you know, MBCT speaks beautifully to many of those. That's, you know, so that those different, give me a second. So the cognitive piece and the emotion regulation piece, they really need each other, but each one can be developed. I think, though, that attention is involved in both of them. So emotionally regulating really, really requires some control over where you're putting your attention. Because once you're emotionally hijacked, if you don't have a means at all, and this is what happens to some children who are, you know, have a kind of neurodiversity where they just can't do that yet, and they don't they don't know how. They just don't know how. And so emotionally regulating, you know, we can sort of scaffold it and say, well, what are all the steps? There's a lot of steps to emotionally regulating, and awareness is a piece of it, that recognizing. But another piece is I have a choice of where I'm going to put my attention. And most people, until they really kind of maybe have a chance to experiment with that, don't think they have much of a choice, especially in today's world where you're being bombarded all over the place, right? So I don't know if that answers that. It's important for adolescents to feel like in control of their lives. And you can't have control without awareness. Like, your control is super limited without awareness. And so to me, that's the kind of the, you know, the carrot, right? Is that, you know, learning the different ways of being aware and the different choices you have gives you more control over something, right? So does that answer?
Yeah. And
Yeah.
I also think, like, another piece of this that's relevant to that, what you said, and to the comment that Paul made, and it's relevant to the book, is that in adapting these programs for youth, again, dependent upon the age and how developed their abilities for abstraction are, we really want to start with things that are quite concrete and tangible, right? And this allows us then to also enhance our awareness of those things that are more easily accessible and perhaps less ephemeral.
Absolutely. And the younger, yeah. And so, although frankly speaking, I think all adults can kind of, you know, use a good booster but you're absolutely right. I think that initially, especially when things are more concrete. In fact, in that study, and I can't remember, I'm sorry, I'm just not remembering the word, but there was this word, like a meta kind of word, that described the kind of mindfulness that we all apply and try to bring to children, that isn't really about mindfulness as in mindful awareness, because they don't have that capacity yet. That capacity.
Proto-mindfulness.
That was it. On the other hand, what they have that we don't have very much of as we get older and older is a beginner's mind and a kind of a curiosity and all the rest. So, you know, there's, like, I think in many ways, bringing mindfulness to adolescents and kids might involve unleashing what they are already kind of a little bit better at than us, which is the beginner's mind, which is the curiosity, which is the, you know, perhaps less stuck in their judgments, etc. Yeah.
Thanks. Okay, I have another chat question for you all, which is, if you could put into the chat, then what do you imagine that some of the challenges are in adopting this work or developing this work for youth? What are some of the challenges around adapting mindfulness programs for youth? And Shawnig is here, so I know she has tons of answers. This is what happens when you know who the people are in the room. I'd love to hear. Okay, engaging the youth. Absolutely. Okay, one of the big things about these programs is if they sign up, they maybe show up for the first one and they drop out really fast. Engaging them is a big deal. Yeah, language they understand. It's got to be accessible. Yeah, one of the things that we did in this book was we really checked out grade level, you know, who it's getting pitched at. Jen said, lack of research, hard to know if it's effective. Yes. Also, you often need a long time, right, to know and they don't get people. Longitudinal studies aren't done very much. Okay, delivery programs, yeah, where to engage them online or in person. Yeah, it can be hard to know what's going to be more effective. Yeah, they may be more expressive and less introspective than adults, but when you're teaching them online, they may not express their expressiveness. So, and then as Sherry's saying, getting them to engage in home practice, that's one of the things in the Marriott City. They don't do it. So here we have all these challenges, right? Someone might think, why bother? So inadvertently, and it really was inadvertent, and it's like, I think one of the reasons Barry, Brian said one of the challenges, yes, being voluntold, absolutely. One of the things, Barry gave us this like glowing review because it just so happened that our book, kind of came out synchronously with this study. And our book looks like an answer to this study, but actually we had no idea anything about this study. We didn't even know of its existence. So as it turns out, as I said, our book is kind of an inadvertent answer, or one answer, and one answer to the study. And so some of the things we did was, rather than teaching directly to youth, in the book we really try to get them to explore and develop their own toolkit and their own practice. So one of the earlier chapters is like meeting your inner world, exploring your inner world. This is a journey. This is a path that they are on. It's a path of self-discovery, if you like, rather than us telling them what to do. And so one of the things that we try to do in the book is to help to create this culture of openness, right? And help them to kind of work with what is relevant and important to them, because this is something that's also critical. Like I was talking about earlier, that you have to meet them where they are and engage them in the things that they're interested in. And then, coming from our experience, the task became how to translate that in a way that was interesting and accessible, that was engaging, that did some of the things you wrote in the chat, that had a lot of variety, had some delight. I often jokingly say I'm the queen of misery because I teach MBCT. That's probably not the way in for most youth. And, we also really tried to take a lot of input from others and distill down the ideas to try to get rid of jargon and make the language as not simple from the standpoint of dumbing it down, but making it accessible. And actually, I think we had a lot of fun doing that.
Yeah.
Surprisingly so. And also, making up exercises that we felt would help meet youth where they are. And so we would get feedback on those. Like, one of the things that's good about having a lot of experience when you're doing work that is derived from the evidence but not evidence-based is really, like you get to make up a lot of shit. And if people like it, then that's really great. And so we have some fun exercises in here, and we'll do a couple in a little while. So I think also that we really when we were writing, we took advantage of each other's strengths, and so that was it. It made it a joy to do. So we'd like to move on now a little bit, and maybe Ellie, you can take this on, please, like in terms of looking at the content in the book and just describing some of the themes and the approaches that we teach.
Okay. So I think you talked a fair bit about the structure and some of the elements. It is a scaffolded thing. It's interesting. The publishers wanted it so open that people could just jump in any old place. And, so to some extent we tried to do that, but really it has to be a bit scaffolded because we're starting with looking at experience and naming things. So it does kind of move along from one thing to another, but I'll tell you what some of the themes are that we talk about. And so as Pat said, some of the, language is as engaging as we could make it. So, you know, in the beginning, there's meeting your inner world. Then we do some things with working with your senses. You can imagine we can have some fun with that. And I think this was from Lee, being the boss of your own brain. Okay, so this is not language we would usually use, but you can see its appeal, absolutely. And getting into stress, we developed things like just education about stress in as accessible a way as possible, and then how to deal with things when things go bad. We talked about little s stress and big S stress. And then we got into communication and connection with things like hear like you're really here and talk like you really care, and growing your mindful heart. And then a section where basically they've been introduced to all these different ways to play around with mindfulness, you know, anything that appeal to them. And then it's a bit of a thing at the end to see, oh, what would you consider, you know, fun to keep going with, or fun to experiment with. So it's really a create your own practice, you know, after being exposed to a lot of these different things. Yeah, and so additionally, in terms of the structure, what we did was we would do some little pieces of context setting, really, you know, where we would introduce some very soft how your brain works, or did you know kind of things. And then there was a fair bit of kind of reflective exercises where you're just kind of reflecting on your own experience, maybe evoking, like, for example, think of a time when you're mad. Okay, you know, bring that to mind and see if you can identify what thoughts are going through your head, you know, that kind of thing. So using their own experience, either by, you know, evoking something from memory or something. There's one where we play different songs and they create a mood and have people reflect on it, things like that. We do some practices, and there's always kind of a few inquiry type questions after people have done that, after teens have done this thing, to just inquire as to what they're noticing, right? Anything they note, the way we would do there, but it's an opportunity to reflect on what came up for them, if anything, as they do these things. So that's kind of the elements, and we thought we'd take you through some of these elements so you had a bit of a feel for it, a little bit of a flavor for it. So I am going to kind of just read you out a couple of things that we use to kind of introduce a theme, right? So I'm just going to read it, and I'll read one on stress. So one of our chapters is on mindful attitudes, but it's called Give Me Attitude. And then, so it's like learning to pay attention is important, but equally important is how we pay attention. So our attitudes shape our experience in positive or negative ways. They can be conscious, but more often, or like they can be a conscious choice, but more often they're a habit, the way we've learned to respond, whether it's helpful or not. So with mindfulness, it's all about awareness of the possibility of seeing or responding to things in a fresh way when we want to or need to. And then we go through a bit of an example of being in a situation where you can, you know, that's a bit activating, and you can kind of check in with your attitude. And then the message here at the end is, you know, attitudes such as just being curious, kindness, patience, non-judgment can be our friends in developing mindfulness. So there would be something like that, and then going right into practicing with it, right? And then I'll just read you, it's shorter, the thing on stress. It's like being human doesn't come with an owner's manual. We have to figure out how to troubleshoot. So experiencing stress is part of being human, inescapable and necessary, part of living and growing, but it can be harmful and wear us down when it's too much. With some knowledge and self-awareness, we can learn how to deal with stress as well as possible. Using mindful skills and attitudes helps us recognize when we're heading into difficulty with stress and gives us some clues about what we need to do. So that was kind of the tone of the sort of context setting and educational pieces. Yeah. So I'm going to have Pat talk about some of the stories.
Thanks, Allie. Okay, so we tried to put in relevant stories that would relate to these sections that we were talking about. So in Meeting Your Inner World, like the book is divided into these sections, like what to know and what to try and more to try. And so in this what to know section, we give a definition of mindfulness, which I'm not going to give you, but I'll just read you this little story and a little context setting piece that set it up. So, and you know, if you listen to the language, as Ali said, like language is not what we would say in our professional lives. But anyway, okay. So mindfulness then is about waking up to living rather than sleepwalking your way through life. It helps us pay attention to what is actually happening in the moment instead of getting caught up in the stories we tell ourselves, reacting and getting overwhelmed. Who wouldn't want to be more open, to see things more clearly, and perhaps have more joy? This is what can come with a mindfulness practice, if you're lucky, but I didn't put if you're lucky in the book. Mindfulness helped Amanda open herself to fears she had. When I was younger, some kids once put a worm down my back. After that, I was always scared of yucky bugs, worms, frogs, mice, and other tiny crawling, flying, or hopping creatures. Once during a mindfulness seeing practice, I saw a small brown tree frog. It was sitting in the grass, minding its own business. Even though I was nervous, I decided to pay attention and get really curious about it, to get to know it by exploring its shape, color, size, movement. It just sat there quietly. Feeling calm, I picked it up. Amazingly, the frog showed no fear. It just sat in my hand while I held it and looked at it for a long time. I could see that it wasn't scary at all. It was just a frog. Finally, I gently put it down, letting it go. Mindfulness helped me get beyond the stories I'd been telling myself and see such creatures in a new way. So this is just a brief illustration, and actually came from an experience I actually had on retreat. And it's true, I hated worms and bugs. Okay, so then we also had these different practices, and so we have this short practice that okay, we made it up. I'm just telling you, we made it up. So, but when you hear it, it's like just a derivative of other things that other people have made up. So it's in the what to try section. So here's a short mindfulness practice that gives you something different to try in those moments you're feeling stress. It's especially helpful for little s stress. We had little s stress and big S stress, but this is little s stress. That's happening in everyday life. Something that's a little tough to deal with, like a test, a performance at school, or the thought of asking your crush to hang out with you sometime, but isn't an emergency. Okay, these might not be little s stresses for some people. Okay, so we have the 4 R's. This is the practice we made up. The first, catch it, which is recognize. Pause and notice that you're feeling stressed. Recognizing there are signals. These are signals from your thoughts, emotions, and or body. The pause interrupts automatic reactions and gives you time to consider your options. Second, pay attention and investigate. This is reflect. Ask yourself, what is here? Turning attention toward your stress reaction with some curiosity gives you more accurate information about what's going on. Third, take a moment and center yourself. Reset. Ask yourself, what is here? Turning attention toward your stress reaction with some curiosity gives you more accurate information about what's going on. Third, take a moment fourth, take a moment to decide what is needed to respond. You can then purposely, not automatically choose how to respond and be the boss of your own brain. Ask the questions, can I stop thinking about it and move on? Can I just accept it? Do I need to respond? If yes, how do I do that and in what way that is best for me? Okay, so any of you who've done any mindfulness will recognize that this is just ripped off from a whole bunch of other things, but it's just our spin. So if we think about how we might work with this in daily life, just very briefly, we have a story. Casey, who you can't see. So Casey texted a new friend about getting together to study, but didn't hear back for a few hours. Here's how he used this practice to check in and get some space from getting caught up in his reaction. Why am I feeling anxious? I need to stop and check in. Recognize. Maybe she doesn't want to study with me. Maybe she doesn't like me. So that's what I'm thinking. Yeah, I'm feeling so stressed and anxious. Now I need to check in with how my body's feeling. My jaw's tight and so are my shoulders. I feel hot. My stomach kind of hurts. That's reflecting. I need to take a breath. Okay, that's what's here. Let me just sit with this for a minute. Reset. I'll wait for a while longer, think about it a bit. Maybe she's just busy, and then I'll text her again. So there's an example of responding. So this is just a couple of examples of the kinds of ways we were trying to engage younger people to deal with their stresses. Okay, so Lee, we have in the agenda talking about reflections and around providing the opportunity for self-inquiry. And we were going to talk to this, but I am now seeing like I have no idea what this is, so you have to talk to it.
Well, that's funny.
How's that for backstage?
But the funny thing about you saying that is that I think that there's a very close relationship between inquiry and reflection, and you are, you're the teacher of inquiry. I mean, you know all about inquiry. So, excuse me, rather than give fish, teach to fish. So really, I think inquiring, like doing a good inquiry, I guess if we really want it to be useful in future times, means that somebody's learning how to inquire within themselves about what's going on. So I think this idea of just, there's, the sky's the limit of the questions you could be asking about what it is that you're noticing. So first you're noticing, but then there's so many questions you can ask yourself. And adolescents and younger people are more naturally curious anyways. So kind of capitalizing on that. And then using that information, and then reflecting. So then it gets taken, it's not just reflecting within yourself, it's also reflecting with other people. So learning how to relationally connect with other people by being more interested in listening and reflecting, or as interested as expressing. So, the whole concept of reflecting makes that interactive, feel seen, that kind of relational thing happens more when you get better at reflecting about what's going on inside for you. So it brings up it's relational mindfulness, basically. So it's good for oneself because reflecting may help me make a decision, if I'm whatever that maybe I need to get up and run around for 2 minutes or something because my energy level has to get up. So it's not just reflection for reflection's sake. There's point to it. It informs next steps. And it also provides a really good way of practicing connecting with oneself and with others, which is a hop, skip, and a jump from then bringing the compassion in, compassion for others, compassion for self. So I think reflection is at the center of much of that. Does that make sense? Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, so in terms of reflection, so part of how we do that is we're bringing attention to what's going on or bringing up something that has gone on. And I'm going to do a bit of a pivot here. We were going to have you bring up some time when you were mad, but I think a lot of us can easily be mad, and that gets so sticky. So we're just so as part of our reflection, and as we move toward coming to the end of this, I'd like you to just listen to this briefly, and then we'll do this as a practice. So it's a more to try exercise in meeting your inner world. So Paying attention in this mindful way to what is going on in your inner world is a useful skill. It provides information that can help you figure out what you need to or might want to do in any given situation. So let's try an example where you can practice this skill. Okay, everybody. So closing your eyes for a moment now and turning the attention inward. And perhaps taking a couple of breaths. Thinking of a time recently where you felt good or joy or happy. A time when you felt uplifted in some way. Really trying to see all the details of that experience. Who's there, if anyone? Where are you? Really bringing that situation to mind. And then just focusing on what you were thinking, maybe what was coming to mind. What thoughts are here as you bring that pleasant event into awareness. And what emotions showed up. Perhaps naming them. What sensations are present as you think of this time? And then lastly, what did you do, if anything? And then when you're ready, just letting that go and opening the eyes. And then we ask people to write it down, but we're not going to ask you to write it down. But you know, the good doesn't stick so well often. So this bringing this up can help to, and then writing it down can help to amplify and reinforce such experiences so that we can access them at other times when we need. And then the last practice that we're going to do, do you want me to do this or do you want to do it, Lee? You're muted.
You can go ahead and do it, Pat. But yeah, just you. Yeah, I'd rather you do it.
Okay. So this practice, again, it's another practice that we ripped off from other practices, but it's really much more relevant for youth. And so Allison and Lee were walking down the beach in the summertime, and you know, they were talking about stuff from the book and practices and what to do. And you know, they got talking about metta practice as I remember it. Now I'm just kind of like riffing on what happened because I wasn't there. But you know, they got talking about metta practice and like how might we begin to help youth around this. So this is our chapter that Allison talked about, growing your mindful heart. And so Lee came up with this thing. They're just like, oh, I hope you're okay. It's so cool. If any of you have ever done metta practice, this is just the best. That's the essence of metta. Oh, I hope you're okay. So we're just going to do a brief metta. Shanning's killing herself now. We'll be doing it on retreat, Shanning. We'll be doing, I hope you're okay. I mean, you know, like you could like really hate somebody, but you could probably muster up a, I hope you're okay. Okay, so here we go. You can do this practice with people you know or don't know, or with a pet or any living being for that matter. So Jen, you can do it with your cat. The point is to set an intention to bring up caring feelings and warm wishes in yourself toward others. It's not actually necessary to feel anything. As an experiment, try one or more of the following for a week. Okay, so now, once again, closing your eyes, if that's okay, and turning the attention inward. Perhaps bringing someone to mind, someone with whom you have some ease. And saying to yourself several times with enough pause to really take it in. And as sincerely as possible, I hope you're okay. I hope you're okay. You can just repeat this to yourself. I hope you're okay. Seeing if you can tap into that feeling or sensation you have for people you really care about in your heart and body. You can even place a hand over the chest if you want to. Repeating that phrase, I hope you're okay. And then you can just let go of that brief practice and opening the eyes. And we just say in the book, as you pass strangers on the street over the next week, try to hold the people you see in mind for a moment and silently say to yourself, I hope you're okay. You might do this for 5 minutes or so once a day, perhaps with 5 people when you're on your way somewhere. Or at random moments when you're with family or friends, take a moment and say to yourself, I hope you're okay. The next time you're with such a group, practice this 5 times during the get-together. You know, we could just be saying it to each other silently now here in all these little squares. I hope you're all okay. May we all be okay. And, you know, if you have a connection with animals and nature, you can direct your good wishes to them, perhaps picking a specific time. All beings and living things are deserving of our care and hopes for their well-being. And it's great to turn attention to that. And doing this contributes to our own happiness, as Michelle Shaban has taught me, with well wishes to all sentient and living creatures. So thank you for being here with us. And we really hope you're all okay. And I don't know if anyone has any questions or comments, we'd love to hear. Yeah, anything that you want to, if there's anything you want to ask. Shauna likes the language, less formal than may you be well and happy. Yeah, and there's something just kind of irreverent and fun. So, yeah.
I appreciated the, oh.
Go ahead, Sherry.
Well, first of all, I appreciated the practices. And as you know, I had the honor of reviewing and endorsing the book. So I got an early sneak peek. And besides the fact that I could, you know, these practices are not just for teens. That's one of the things that really stood out to me. And also, I was going to say, during the practice, when you think of someone who's easy, it's usually my dogs, but they were barking. So it was a little bit of a conflict. But anyway, I just thought it was a fantastic book, and hearing more about it and being reminded, because it was quite some time ago that I did that. It's just not only really practical for teens, but for their parents and for teachers and therapists to work with them, and just all the different range of kind of usable practices, and the adaptations are really fantastic. So congratulations, you guys did an amazing job, and it's really a gift to the world.
Thanks, Sherry.
Thank you.
Really appreciate
Thanks,
it.
Sherry. Thanks, Camilla.
Any questions from anyone? Where did Paul? Oh, Paul says, congratulations. Oh, where's the book available? It's available on Amazon, and it's also available from New Harbinger Press. And hers, yes, you can get Dr. Freedman to sign your copy. Yeah, thank you. Anyway, yeah, thank you so much. And we really appreciate you being there. And Paul, thank you for asking us to tell people where they got it. Tim or Tita, you want to say something?
Yeah, I just want to say something about, you know, when you were talking about all of these grants that we got, for me, they were a survival thing, right? But really, just listening to you talk about every grant was really a test of our faculty. And I just want to say that our faculty always pass the test. And I am so grateful for that. Thank you.
Thanks, Tita.
Thank you, Tita.
Yeah, it's like interdependence in operation.
Right.
So thank you, everyone, and for coming. And if you want to unmute, perhaps we can all say to each other, "I hope you're okay," and good night.
Okay, thanks so much.
I hope you're okay.
I hope you're all okay.
And good night.
Good night. Good night, all.
Great job, guys. Thanks so much for bringing this into the world.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Congratulations.
Thanks,
Yes,
Sam.
congratulations. Yes.
Yes, congrats.
Oh, there's my husband marketing.
Good job. Mark it away.